I don't think we're in the 4-year cycle. I think we are in a cycle that lasts until it lasts. But the Fed has started cutting rates. They want to juice the housing market, trillions of dollars of home equity go into financial markets. So this cycle is different. If you want to take a look at Chinese credit and US credit, which leads me to say there is no 4-year cycle, at least right now. And so I am of the opinion that this cycle ends when the...
Because in any case, that we should be seeing a lot of strength. But I would say that the real test, there's really two tests that will come up. Is one, is Bitcoin going to follow a price cycle next year, which would be a downturn? The past crypto winters have been really painful. Drawdowns or declines for Bitcoin from the peak of more than 70%, maybe 90%. And the altcoins and non-Bitcoin doing far worse.
过去12年来，比特币价格按照4年周期的规律上涨和下跌，屡试不爽。但如果这次不一样呢？你可能将错过财富自由的机会。前 BMS 执行长 Arthur Hayes 在最新的访谈中分享，为什么他认为比特币会持续上涨，这次不一样。但华尔街顶级分析师 Tom Lee 却不同意，认为4年周期还是有参考性。更重要的是，紧盯这2个数据，究竟我们该相信历史数据卖出比特币，还是相信大佬判断买入比特币？所以今天我们将深入探讨比特币的4年周期还有效吗？还会分享我是如何投资才能在比特币上涨和下跌时都持续赚钱。如果你想投资比特币增加收入，但又害怕价格暴跌、资产缩水，看完这一集，你将学会安心的投资方法，不再为币价波动感到焦虑。嗨，我是 Emma。要了解4年周期，就要先回到比特币的产生方式。不像是我们常见的台币和美元，是透过国家决定发行的数量，所以可以无限量印钞，导致货币价值下降，物价越来越贵。比特币在2008年创立时，就已经决定了发行的总数量和产生速度。总数量是2100万颗，大约每4年生产的数量会减少一半。物以稀为贵，所以每当比特币数量减少一半后，价格就会开始上涨。这也是人性最有趣的地方，一旦价格上涨就会去追高，所以比特币通常会在减半的隔年达到最高点，之后开始大暴跌。这是比特币从2012年到2024年的报酬率。2012年是第一次减半，当年报酬率是上涨。2013年更是大暴涨，2014年下跌，2015年盘整，形成第一次的4年周期循环。同样的模式也复制下去。2016年是第2次减半，一样上涨。2017年再次大暴涨，2018年下跌，2019年盘整，形成第2次的4年周期循环。大家开始怀疑还会继续吗？2020年是第3次减半，还是上涨？2021年还是大暴涨，2022年还是下跌，2023年还是盘整，形成第3次的4年周期循环。整整3次都应验，也太猛了吧！去年2024年是第4次减半，报酬率一样上涨。今年2025年币价再次创新高，明年2026年币价会下跌吗？还是这次会不一样？投资想赚钱，最重要的是要有自己的判断。所以在听专家分析前，我认为不如先按下暂停键，想想自己的答案。等等听完后，再和自己的答案比较，有什么是自己没考虑到的？哪些内容你觉得不合理？准备好了吗？
3, 2, 1
接下来我整理了2大权威，前 BMS 执行长 Arthur Hayes 以及华尔街顶级分析师 Tom Lee 对于这次4年周期的最新看法。
I don't think we're in the 4-year cycle. I think we are in a cycle that lasts until it lasts. But okay, let's go back to think about there's been 3 4-year cycles, right? 2009 to 2013, 2013 to 2017, 2017 to 2021, right? And if we take a look at I try to make it as simple as possible and use the same chart in each 3 periods. And so I took a look at Fed funds rate, effective Fed funds rate. I created a US dollar credit index, a proxy, which is basically just other deposits and liabilities from the banking system in the United States, and reserves at the Fed. So that'll capture quantitative easing or quantitative tightening, and it'll capture bank credit growth up or down. And then as a kicker, I said, well, you can't talk about the United States without China because they're kind of interlocked and they either complement each other or go in opposite directions. And so, I just pulled a Bloomberg credit 12 months change credit impulse index. And so if we take a look at the first cycle, we have essentially the genesis of Bitcoin, which is, I believe, a reaction to the response of the United States to the global financial crisis. I don't believe it's a coincidence that it was published on, the 3rd of January, 2009, right after Ben Bernanke announced quantitative easing, Infinity or One, TARP, all that kind of stuff, right? At the same time, China did its part, and they went on the largest expansion of infrastructure credit fuel growth in its history, and you'll see the chart. And so basically, you have yuan and dollar credit being issued ad infinitum in 2009. That sort of catches up with the Bitcoin price by late 2013, and we get that $1,000 or $1,400, whatever you want to call it, peak right before MTGOX imploded. You'll see in 2013 that credit growth rolls over a bit. You have the taper tantrum in the United States in mid 2013, which finally catches up with credit growth. In China, they were not growing credit as fast as they were. So the rate of it, it decelerated, even though it was still growing. The second derivative was deceleration. And so that popped the first crypto bubble. Then we moved to 2017 bubble, the ICO bubble. And in that instance, you had China leading the way, where they went on a massive credit expansion in 2015, which caused a high in the Shanghai stock market, a massive devaluation of yuan in August of 2015. And this sort of brought Bitcoin out of its doldrums. And that started the 2017 ICO rally. But the United States is going in the opposite direction. Fed funds was actually increasing once we get into 2017, and credit growth was falling. And so finally that caught up with Bitcoin, because you can't really escape the time value of money. No, nobody can. And the bubble pops in 2017 by the end of 2017. Then we get the third bubble, or whatever you're going to call it, the COVID response. Obviously, we know what that story was all about. That was stimulus checks in the United States. China was very circumspect in the amount of money it issued, but again, its credit growth increased. And by late 2021, we had the Fed talking about how it was going to restrain its balance sheet, increase interest rates due to inflation. And pretty predictably, Bitcoin peaked in November, right around the time when everyone expected the Fed to start on a tightening cycle. And now we're in the current cycle. And basically this cycle has been about the reverse repo program, which was the $2.5 trillion that bad girl Yellen injected into the markets starting in 2022. And that has basically run out until now. And so if you're a proponent of this theory of, okay, for your cycle, you would say, oh, well, take a look, reverse repo at zero, there's no more liquidity. But the Fed has started cutting rates. You have Trump and Bessent talking about how they want to run the economy hot, which basically means either the Fed prints money or the banking system prints money. I don't care which one. You can listen to speeches. They'll talk about either one interchangeably. They want to juice the housing market. I don't have the chart in front of me, but it's something like trillions of dollars of home equity that is basically sitting dormant on the balance sheet of the American public and their housing market. And Trump is going to lower mortgage rates. However he does it, there's various ways to do it, to unlock that money to then go into financial markets or buy a house, buy a car, but whatever. Trump is talking about stimulus checks. China, which has been in essentially on and off deflation in terms of credit growth over the last few years, is making noise that they want to revitalize the housing market. Will it be as crazy as 2015? No, but it won't be as bad as it's been post-COVID. So this cycle is different than the last three. If you want to take a look at Chinese credit and US credit, which leads me to say there is no 4-year cycle, at least right now. And so we are in sort of a extended cycle, whatever you want to call it, new world order, change in, trade situation, whatever, right? And so I am of the opinion that this cycle ends when the Trump administration ends, because it'll be a reaction against Trump, whether you like it or not, doesn't really matter. And, that's a 2028, late 2027 story when the rhetoric of the opposing Team Blue Democrats starts to cause questions in investors' minds. Oh, what if they win? And therefore, what if things change? Therefore, I should take some chips off the table. So that's my guiding light. And
well, I think when people talk about a crypto cycle and it being 4 years, there's probably some reflexivity at work because the original genesis was that, Bitcoin had a halving cycle. And so people were talking about a price cycle that really followed a Bitcoin in a halving. But in crypto, as you know, because there isn't a company, it's decentralized, and there's no centralized source of information, price itself often becomes really important, especially in the early days. So I think that there was a lot to people looking at patterns and then markets trading on those patterns. And the reality is that it's still true in the equity world because I can't tell you how many of our institutional clients still look at seasonality, which is just applying a calendar to what price action could be, either whether it's credit or volatility or equity. So every element of liquid markets today. I think that there is probably some credence because many people are positing that the 4-year cycle may not be in place anymore. Everybody from Bitwise, to David Bailey, so a lot of OGs, and that has to do with the fact that the incremental buyer of Bitcoin is no longer retail, which was really the story from inception up until probably 2024. And so now in the last 2 years, there's now institutional allocations taking place into crypto. And because of that, it's probably counter-cyclical.
We heard the same thing or something similar in the last cycle. Everyone was talking about a super cycle back then. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be correct. What would you be looking at as indicators or at least this year to see whether we will continue seeing a 4-year cycle beyond obviously the price movement? Well,
our crypto strategist, Sean Farrell, still writes about the 4-year cycle. And it probably doesn't matter between now and the end of the year, because in any case that we should be seeing a lot of strength. But I would say that the real test, there's really 2 tests that will come up. Is one, is Bitcoin going to follow a price cycle next year, which would be a downturn? And is Bitcoin going to diverge from the equity markets next year? And I think that there's a chance that both take place, and that's why we'll be talking less about a cycle because as you know, Bitcoin also historically followed equity markets pretty closely too.
Interesting. Just for the audience, so if we do go through a 4-year cycle for people outside of crypto, that means that by the end of this year, if we look at previous cycles, we should see the beginning of a bear market and a pretty significant correction. And it goes to my next question is, if we do see a 4-year cycle, how do you see that correction relative to previous ones now that institutions have come in? Finally, the herd is here. Remember, the herd is coming, Tom, in 2017. That was the slogan. Well, it seems that the herd is here in a different form that no one expected. But now that the herd is here, what would that correction look like?
Yeah, again, and now we're being theoretical because I'm not necessarily calling for a correction or a crypto winter. The past crypto winters have been really painful. Drawdowns or declines for Bitcoin from the peak of more than 70%, maybe 90%. And the altcoins and non-Bitcoin doing far worse. I would say that it's not just institutions that are coming and buying Bitcoin now. I think that there is sovereign purchases of Bitcoin taking place. And, the U.S. government, while it hasn't completely articulated its strategy for building a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but we know the U.S., when oil prices are low, they are a stabilizer for oil because they are filling that SPR or strategic petroleum reserve at low prices. And that always puts a floor for oil. If Bitcoin enters a winter and the U.S. pursues a budget neutral strategy to acquire Bitcoin, that means there'll be really active buyers of Bitcoin at lower prices. So if you always have a buyer at lower prices, you're kind of bounding your downside.
你支持哪个观点？是前 BMAS 执行长 Arthur Hayes 认为的4年周期已死，因为美国已经降息，中国预计救房地产，所以将会有大量资金流入市场。比特币将会顺势上涨，直到川普2028年下台，币价才会下跌。还是华尔街顶级分析师 Tom Lee 的看法，即便比特币币价明年下跌，但幅度会变小，因为现在的投资者是机构和国家主导。底下留言分享你的看法。我认为投资没有对错，只有个人选择。特别投资是未来的事情，即使我不认为有谁能真正预测出答案。所以身为普通投资者的我们，最重要的是看哪个选择对自己最有利。像现在币价是10万，假设现在卖了，如果明年比特币大涨到15万，那我们就是少赚5万。但如果明年是暴跌80%到2万，那我们就是少亏8万。相反的，假设我们选择持有，如果明年比特币大涨到15万，那我们就是多赚5万。但如果明年是暴跌80%到2万，那我们就是亏了8万。就看自己是能接受卖飞少赚钱，还是更能承受暴跌亏钱的状态。又或是你觉得小孩子才做选择，我全都要。今天不论比特币是上涨或是下跌，我都想要赚钱，那该怎么做呢？恭喜你来对地方了！我投资币圈4年，投资了现货、合约、网格等等方法，最后发现只有放贷，不论比特币是创新高到12万，又或是暴跌到1.5万，都能持续获利，带给我一份稳定的收入。像是2025年10月11日，美国总统川普宣布对中国实施100%关税政策，引发市场恐慌，演变成史上最惨的192亿美元合约大爆仓。正当无数币圈投资者看着亏损，不知道该怎么办时，当时的我领着一份投资收入，在加拿大赏枫叶。这并不是我比较厉害，而在于一开始选的投资策略，就决定了未来的财富状态和生活。因为选择放贷，让我再也不用担心半夜比特币价格暴跌，一早起床就看到账户亏损而崩溃，反而是能够好好睡觉，每天起床时就看到有收入进账，计划今天要去哪里玩。像是工程师 Sky 放贷利率高达20%，又像是公务员陈大哥认为投资放贷每天就像捡到钱一样开心。所以如果你不愿意再被币价操控生活，而是想要有一份被动收入，可以去做自己想做的事情，那相信放贷会很适合你哦。去年我还受邀到香港分享币圈投资经历，希望能避免新手再犯下我过去的错误，不用走弯路就能在币圈投资赚钱，过上每天睡到自然醒的生活。所以我准备了一个免费教学影片，分享自己是如何从什么都不懂的币圈韭菜，到现在成功打造一份稳定安心的被动收入。你可以在资讯栏的第2条链接中找到，一起在币圈安心赚钱。我是 Emma， 还会继续分享关于币圈投资被动收入的经验。记得按赞、订阅、开启旁边的小铃铛，并打开全部，还有 follow 我的 IG 哦，那你就不会错过这些知识了。我们下周见，拜拜。